BBC Sounds.
So before you listen to your podcast, do something a bit different.
Yep, listen to the most petty and ill-informed podcast available. It's Off the Ball. It's on BBC Sounds.
The Scottish Football Podcast.
From BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to BBC Scotland's daily football podcast with me, Jane Lewis. If you haven't already done so, you can subscribe at BBC Sounds. In this episode, we'll discuss the use of pyrotechnics in Scottish football. This after last night's match at Dens Park was delayed after Rangers fans set off flares in the away end. Later, we'll hear about the situation in the Netherlands in light of a recent punishment for misuse of fireworks being handed out to a Dutch club. But first of all, to Dens Park last night.
2 minutes in, nothing each. Rangers beginning the game on the front foot, but clearly attention off to our left. The amount of smoke that is coming from that away section. And it's another example of the pyrotechnics causing issues in Scottish football. Kevin Clancy's coming over to talk to one of the senior police officials in charge of proceedings this evening. Kevin Clancy is finished talking to the managers, and I think he's going to take everyone off here. So the two sets of players, having played 2 minutes of football, are being withdrawn from the pitch after the pyrotechnics, which were lit en masse in the Rangers end off to our left. So play is suspended.
No, it's not a good thing that we need to step inside and that we have to break our rhythm. I'm not the guy who needs to say what fans need to do, but those things are better not done because we want to play football and we want to keep our rhythm.
Well, when it gets to the stage when you almost get a game abandoned because of that, I think there has to be action taken, because I did think at that stage, once we spoke with the police and all the fire alarms were going off here, I did think the game was going to be postponed, which for every travelling fan, for every, all the organisation goes into a game, it does need to be considered.
Well, that's the Dundee manager Tony Docherty and before him the Rangers manager Philippe Clement. Now the SPFL have released a statement following last night's incident. A spokesman said the extensive use of pyrotechnics at the match at Dens Park is very concerning and unwelcome. The disruption to the game is obviously extremely regrettable. We await the delegate reports and will be liaising with Police Scotland on the incident. Well, let's reflect on this further, shall we? Sports writer from the Scotsman, Alan Pattullo, joins us now. Alan, you were there last night, weren't you? What were you thinking when you saw that the amount of flares that were set off?
Yeah, it was just an extraordinary evening, wasn't it? I remember covering the Scotland v Georgia game earlier this summer, thinking we wouldn't live through something like that again in our lifetime, but here we were, fewer than 6 months later. The delay for traffic congestion, the Rangers team bus arriving at 7:25 p.m, I think it was. Finally, we got the game going at 8:31, I think it was. I looked at my watch and by 8:33, I think, the game had been suspended again. There wasn't really much option, was there? The smoke that was billowing down from the Bob Shankly stand, from the dozens of flares that had been let off from just after kick-off meant they couldn't be played, certainly not in that goal mouth until the smoke dispersed. And then, of course, the added problem of the fire alarm going off, which at Dens Park, very specifically at Dens Park, because obviously the old main stand there, dating back to 1921, has a wooden floor, other wooden details to it, and so obviously you have to be very, very concerned regarding the potential for fire breaking out. And so pyro, it does give a good atmosphere. The use of pyro in the right place, perhaps a more controlled setting. That wasn't the case last night, and I think obviously there will be repercussions. I did say in my match report, I think, on the Scotsman last night that we're hearing about this game for days to come, and that's proving to be the case already.
Yeah, Alan, we should just say you are out and about this afternoon because you're a busy man, and that's why we've got some background noise with you. But is it a sight you think you're seeing more and more in Scottish football?
Yeah, I think it is. It's interesting. Again, Dens Park, quite specifically, perhaps, and compared to somewhere like Tynecastle, who are restricting the number of Rangers and Celtic fans that can come into the game. 4,000 away fans last night. The situation now, the problem now is how do you stop that? How do you man the turnstiles and control and have surveillance outside the ground, perhaps, to try and stem the problem? I know there were some people getting searched last night, but I think these pyros are getting concealed in different parts of people's bodies, etc., and down the front of their trousers or whatever, and people can get in with them. And I'm sure in the days ahead, there'll be meetings to try and find a way to try and combat this. I think people have also mentioned the prospect of bringing in police sniffer dogs as a possibility. There's also, I think, scanning devices they can use. But again, this costs money, and Scottish football is not swimming in money.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about maybe how clubs can clamp down further on this, because Dundee have also released a statement this afternoon. They said that they are investigating what they're calling a series of unacceptable incidents, and they're working with the authorities. They then go on to say that despite robust practice by all clubs, flares, offensive banners, the singing of sectarian songs, all continue to be a problem. And it's interesting they talk about the fact that the clubs are taking robust practice, but it's not enough, because the flares and other items are getting into the grounds, as you say.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, Dundee are well aware of the problem. Obviously, they had strict measures in place last night. Even then, they couldn't stop it. They had some intelligence that this was going to happen potentially, and even then, well, we saw it happen. 60, 70 flares, I think somebody brought into the ground. And it's not just this park. It happens at Hampden. It'll be fascinating to see what happens this weekend at the semi-finals, League Cup semi-finals, and whether there'll be pyro there. And I'm sure there possibly will be. So it's not as if it's just a club like Dundee or these kind of stadiums. And we have seen that in bigger occasions than last night. Scottish Cup finals, League Cup finals last season. There's a huge pyro displays, wasn't there? I remember, I think it was a Celtic Hibs game last season. There was rocket launchers, these pyros being launched into the sky, and it just it does underline that this has become an ever increasing problem. How do you combat it, or do you have controlled pyro put in place, perhaps? But I get the feeling that fans almost like the illicit nature of it. We saw the back pages of other newspapers today. Everyone used that picture because it was so striking.
You say right at the top of this that this is going to be a story that is going to kind of rumble on, and we're going to be talking about it. And we understand that later this month that there will be a meeting to discuss this very issue. The Football Safety Officers Association have asked for a meeting with the SPFL, Police Scotland and the Scottish Government. That suggests that they're taking this seriously. But I just wonder, what will that yield? Because obviously we saw new laws introduced in June making it a criminal offence to possess pyrotechnics at football matches. Yet, as we saw last night, it's not holding much water, it would appear.
Well, absolutely. It'd be interesting to see if there were any arrests made last night, what the situation was regarding that last night. Last night, for example, 4,000 away fans all piling in half an hour before kick-off. I know kick-off was delayed last night, but a lot of the fans didn't come in. A lot of them in these days kind of stand outside the ground and come in at the last minute. How do you search 4,000 fans within, coming in a space of, say, half an hour? Very, very difficult. So I'm sure these will be problems that will be addressed at this meeting. But I'm glad it's been taken seriously, and that does seem a very prescient meeting, doesn't it? Given what happened last night, and it's a very timely meeting. I think. I don't know what measures can you put in place.
Well, that's a pertinent point. That the sanctioning, the punishments that are dished out, because no Scottish club has ever been sanctioned by the SPFL for the use of fireworks or flares. Surely, for it to be taken seriously, that has to change, that there has to be some kind of punishments dished out, does there not?
Yeah, I think there probably has. I think there probably has to be, and just whether the SPFL board puts these sanctions in place. And obviously Rangers will be in the firing line following last night. They'll have to wait for the SPFL delegates report, Dundee security report. I'm sure they will look at that with a keen eye and see what they can do, but I won't hold my breath.
Alan, thank you very much for joining us on this podcast. Pyrotechnics within football isn't just a Scottish issue, it's fairly widespread in Europe. We're joined now by Elko Born, a Dutch football writer. Elko, thanks so much for joining us. How big an issue is flares and fireworks at football games in the Netherlands?
Yeah, it's a pretty big issue in the Netherlands. For quite a while, I think fireworks and pyrotechnics have not been allowed in Dutch stadiums, but for a long time, not much was done against it, really. Some way or the other, Dutch fans managed to smuggle in fireworks into the stadium. They are being set off quite regularly in Dutch football stadiums, and they have been for years now, and not much is done about it at all. And lately, especially last year and this season as well, it's become quite problematic, actually. And I think the Dutch FA is really scratching their head thinking, why did we allow this for so long? And what do we do now that we're facing these problems?
Do you think they're now taking it more seriously, but as you say, maybe wondering how they can now stop it because they have let it get to a certain level?
Yeah, the Dutch FA are really thinking about ways to stop it. There's been a number of incidents this year, lately as well, with the Ajax-Feyenoord game. It was abandoned when Feyenoord were 3-0 ahead because flares were being thrown on the pitch. So they had to actually stop the match. And the players just went home and that was that. It's a huge problem. We know that a lot of fan groups in the Netherlands for different clubs, not just Ajax and Feyenoord, but all around the country, are somehow bringing in these fireworks. And again, while it's not allowed, they managed to do that anyway, and not much is being done against it. And problems they are taking it so far now that games are having to be abandoned. So obviously new rules need to be put in place to put a stop to this. But so far the Dutch FA hasn't really been able to express these rules or come up with them.
I mean, that's a pretty big step, isn't it? Abandoning a game. And obviously, from doing a little bit of research between that Ajax and Feyenoord game, we know that there's going to be a partial closure of their stadium. Ajax have also been fined as well. Is that punishment coming from the football authorities? And might, in your opinion, that maybe go some way to try and stop this?
Well, it's a beginning, I think, but a lot of people here in the Netherlands agree that it's not enough because new rules were put in place last year when actually various objects, not just fireworks, but all sorts of objects were being thrown onto the pitch, including cigarette lighters. An Ajax player, Davy Klaassen, got hit on the head last year with a cigarette lighter during last year's Feyenoord-Ajax game. It injured him. He had a wound on his head, and there was blood as well. And the players had to leave the pitch for a while. They came back a little later to finish that game. But we've seen loads of problems in the Netherlands with all sorts of misbehavior in stadiums, including fireworks and including all sorts of objects being thrown onto the pitch, even being thrown at players. Now, fireworks is being thrown on the pitch as well. The Dutch FA are trying to do things about it, abandoning games, warning fans that, look, as soon as anything at all, even a plastic beer cup is thrown on the pitch, we will abandon games. And they have been doing that. But this seems to only provoke some fans. For example, the Ajax-Feyenoord game you mentioned, Ajax were behind 3-0 against their arch enemies Feyenoord, which seems to have provoked Ajax fans to say, okay, we would rather have this game abandoned. We're just going to throw a flare onto the pitch. The Dutch FA will abandon the game. That's fine with us. We're behind anyway, and that's what we'll do. So obviously, this is not a real punishment for Ajax fans. And a lot of people are saying now, you'll need to come up with harsher punishments, really. Just abandoning games is not enough.
Yeah, I mean, that seems an incredible response from some sections of the fans, doesn't it? What would be your answer if you had the powers to try and clamp down on things? What should the authorities try and do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, we need harsher punishments. So I think it's a good step in the first direction to abandon games if objects are thrown on the pitch or fireworks are used in the stadium. But then you would need a follow-up punishment as well, be that heftier fines or maybe even deducting points to really make sure that you don't provoke or invite fans to throw things on the pitch when things aren't going their way. So I think that's important. Furthermore, I think it's important to really, really make clubs responsible for their own security and safety in the stadiums as well, because I think clubs are not asked enough to take care of their own security enough. Usually at football in the Netherlands, the police is required to take care of security. And for them, obviously, it's very difficult to take control inside and outside of football stadiums, inside especially. So what politics in the Netherlands, politicians have to say to Dutch football clubs is, look, we expect you to pay for security and take care of it and make sure that these things can't happen in Dutch football stadiums, because football clubs are not doing enough about that here.
Might we just see games being played behind closed doors? No fans at all, whether home or away?
I think that's definitely a possibility. They're already abandoning games now. They play some games without away fans. Mayors who are responsible in the Netherlands, the mayors of this, for example, the city of Amsterdam, they are responsible for the police, who are responsible for security and safety. They have threatened in the Netherlands with these type of measures as well. They've said things like, look, if football clubs don't take care of security and we can't do this, and fans are misbehaving as badly as they are, then we'll have to think about measures like you said, well, we might have to have games being played behind closed doors with no fans at all. I think we're quite close in the Netherlands to maybe something like this happening.
Is everyone, I wonder, in the Netherlands of the opinion that flares and fireworks don't belong at football? I wonder, are there some groups who maybe think that there might be some kind of controlled environment, maybe some small section of the ground that could house fans that want to set up flares, as long, obviously, as it's done safely and they're not thrown onto the pitch, for example?
Yeah, you see clubs in the Netherlands do that as well. They'll do controlled fireworks displays. And some people are saying now as well that that is a mistake. It only seems to encourage the use of fireworks for fans as well. It could be a strategy, I think, to say, look, we'll do a bunch of controlled fireworks shows. But then I think that would need to go hand in hand with actually clamping down on fans smuggling their own fireworks into the stadium as well. Because obviously that kind of goes against what you're trying to do with this strategy of controlled displays. So, they have done that. They have tried that in the Netherlands, but it doesn't seem to sort a lot of effect with the fans so far.
Elko, thank you very much indeed. Really interesting to get your take on that from the Netherlands. Good to talk to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
My thanks also to Alan, who joined us earlier, and thank you for listening. There'll be a new Scottish football podcast tomorrow. Make sure you tune in for that.
The Scottish Football Podcast
from BBC Radio Scotland.
A reminder, Behind the Goals with me, Rachel Corsey and Leanne Crichton is now available every Tuesday. Make sure you tune in every week for all things women's football and plenty of special guests. Just search Behind the Goals on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds.